National Weather Service in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is Jonathan Blaze with the latest update on Tropical Storm Ian here on Thursday morning. Thanks for joining us here. It's been a busy morning with a lot of changes, so sit tight. We got some news and some adjustments to the forecast. What has changed? Ian is forecast to strengthen into a hurricane later today and into tonight and make landfall across coastal South Carolina on Friday as a hurricane. The system is just emerging from the coast of Florida this morning. The storm track and forecast track has continued to kind of shift east with time in minor increments, but now is forecast to move across the central coast of South Carolina during the afternoon on Friday as a hurricane with the maximum sustained winds likely in the 75 to 85 mile per hour range, which is stronger than what was forecast in previous updates. With that stronger storm system now expected to move onshore in South Carolina, a larger wind field and a stronger wind field is expected to envelop and spread into the Carolinas and into North Carolina during the day Friday and Friday night. Accordingly, with that, we've made some significant adjustments to our forecast in terms of increasing wind speeds and issuing a tropical storm warning for much of central North Carolina. We'll touch base on that here in just a minute. On the map, you can see, again, the latest advisory shows the center of the system just emerging off the central Florida East Coast with an arc of a track that's expected to go northeast and then north and then turn slightly north-northwest during the day Friday, again making landfall somewhere in central coastal South Carolina, midday, perhaps early afternoon on Friday, and then begin to weaken pretty quickly as it moves inland, likely decreasing into a tropical storm by Friday evening and then a depression by Friday night or Saturday morning as it slows down and stalls across the southern Appalachians. There are hurricane warnings now in effect for coastal South Carolina, and tropical storm warnings have been extended up across just about all of the North Carolina coast up to about Duck in the northeast part of the state. So that includes the Outer Banks and parts of the Sounds across North Carolina. The impacts in terms of central North Carolina have changed slightly, primarily an increase in expected wind speeds and wind gusts. The good news is that still the wind speeds across our area certainly aren't going to be terribly strong to cause widespread problems, but it is a growing concern. Probably the heaviest or biggest impact that we're worried about would be the heavy rain that's likely to come in from south to north with the heaviest rain falling in our area beginning mid to late morning on Friday and then continuing into Friday night. I mentioned the strong gusty winds, and also there's an isolated tornado threat as well. So what's new this morning? We have a tropical storm warning that's in effect for much of central North Carolina. It does not include the Virginia border counties, where winds there are likely to be just slightly weaker and not reaching the tropical storm warning criteria. These tropical storm warnings also extend to the east and south and southwest down toward the coast and also the South Carolina border. We have also just issued a flood watch for all of central North Carolina. That's in effect beginning late tonight and through Saturday morning. That product just went out just a few minutes ago, so I don't have a graphic for that, but it does include our entire area here on the map. Our hazards in terms of an overview, wind is highlighted here. We do expect localized wind gusts of 40 to 50 miles per hour across much of the area, primarily in that tropical storm warning region. That will result in some power outages, probably scattered, perhaps numerous across the south. And it could be some minor wind damage, thinking of trees and lawn furniture kind of getting blown around. We do expect wind gusts in excess of 35 miles per hour across the whole area. That includes the Virginia border counties. Again, the strongest winds will likely be south of Raleigh, perhaps Fayetteville, over to Wadesboro and Asheboro, that kind of corridor. The strongest winds are expected really Friday through perhaps midday, maybe early morning on Saturday. Now, if you've been outside today, you've noticed that we already have gusty winds out there now. That is in part related to Ian, but also related to a strong high pressure area across the Great Lakes region that's causing gusty winds really from the Chesapeake Bay across our area and into the mountains. Those winds will likely continue throughout much of the day today. They'll gust perhaps 30, 35 miles per hour and maybe tail off a little bit this evening and then begin to increase again as the actual center of the storm approaches on Friday. Flooding rain continues to be a concern. We expect an average of 2 to 6 inches of rain. The greatest amounts will likely fall across the coastal areas and also in southern parts of North Carolina. That is likely to cause some localized flooding concerns in smaller streams, creeks, urban areas, low-lying areas, typical places that are prone to flash flooding. The greatest threat again there would be across the southern Piedmont down toward the coast, including the Yadkin Valley area. There's a small risk of tornadoes. That's primarily on Friday afternoon through Friday evening. That is generally going to be confined to near and especially east of Interstate 95. So the coastal plain counties where we typically see that kind of threat is expected there. And there's a minor risk of, or there is a risk of minor river flooding across much of the area. There's a few locations we're a little bit more concerned about. That might be the Rocky River area. The Hall River typically responds in these kind of events. But we do not expect widespread or significant river flooding issues. This is likely to be a quick arriving and more of a flash flood, smaller stream creek kind of an issue. Looking at a graphic here, just highlighting the largest concerns. Obviously, rain and flash flooding is the biggest concern. We've increased the wind threshold here in terms of a threat. Tornado threat is limited in area, just again, east of Interstate 95, and should be very isolated, but it is a concern, and river flooding is probably our least worry at this point. So highlighting the wind gust area, this highlights the whole region, perhaps in terms of the strongest wind gusts, like I mentioned, over 35 miles per hour. But this region, maybe from Wilmington to Fayetteville to Asheboro, down towards Charlotte, probably is this corridor where we have the greatest threat of wind gusts up to 45 to 50 miles per hour or so. Localized gusts can be expected anywhere, but this is probably where the biggest power outage threat is there. In terms of probabilities of tropical storm force winds, the corridor of the greatest probability, again, is near and just right of where the storm is expected to make landfall in coastal South Carolina. So extending up toward Florence and then into just near Fayetteville, over toward Lumberton and these kind of regions well to the south across the South Carolina border counties, and then kind of arcing up toward the western Piedmont, even the Yadkin Valley Triad area. The lowest probabilities up to the northeast and near the Virginia border area. Again, that's the area we did not include in the tropical storm warning at this point. We won't look into timing of this because I get this question a lot. The earliest reasonable arrival of tropical storm force winds, so this typically is kind of the worst case scenario in terms of the earliest arrival. They might spread into the southern areas as early as before daybreak, so between 2 a.m. and 8 a.m. Again, this is probably a little bit aggressive, but I wouldn't expect any wind concerns really at all Thursday night, and the winds picking up as we head toward daybreak across the south on Friday, and then across much of the area by midday and certainly the afternoon on Friday. So if we're thinking of travel concerns, if you're in the Fayetteville area down in those locations near the South Carolina border, the morning commute is likely to be both rainy, windy, and gusty. So a really yucky morning down there, and that likely will impact the morning commute and the school bus and transportation kind of concerns. In the north, I think the heaviest rain and the strongest winds will occur after the morning commute, more likely toward midday and early afternoon. Across the whole area of the afternoon drive on Friday is likely to be a bust and a real mess. And if anybody still has outdoor activities or football games on Friday night, those are likely going to be enveloped in heavy rain at times and strong gusty winds. Inland flooding impacts. The greatest flooding threat, again, is to our south and west here in this red outlined area, mainly across the South Carolina border area, southern Piedmont, Charlotte, Wadesboro, even just south of Fayetteville, lesser threats to the north, but the inland flooding threat will be very localized. So it's probably more important to think of which locations are flood prone or typically susceptible to that kind of thing is probably the best way to think of it. And here's a precipitation forecast. The yellow shows 4 to 6 inches of rain forecast for the event. The highest amounts near the coast, coastal plain, and then arcing near the South Carolina border and up toward the southern Appalachians. Kind of a minimum up in the Triad. And the greatest rainfall threat probably in our area would be Wilson, Goldsboro, Fayetteville, and then again around toward Wadesboro and those kind of areas. These amounts of 4 to 6 inches are significant, and then they will likely result in quite a bit of runoff. Much of that rain will occur over a short period of time, let's say Friday morning through Saturday morning, so a 24-hour, 18-hour period. So that will result in quite a bit of runoff, and again, that's why we're concerned about flash flooding. We'll also hopefully improve some of the drought conditions across much of the area as well. That's in general more than a month's worth of rain in 24 hours. That's pretty significant. The excessive rainfall outlook from the Weather Prediction Center again highlights the same concern areas we talked about earlier, with the greatest threats, perhaps Lumberton over to Charlotte, and just impinging across our southern areas. But again, localized flash flooding is something to keep in mind for most of the area. The tornado threat should again be confined mainly near and especially east of Interstate 95, and the greatest threats are likely to be pinned into a county or so from the coast, it would appear at this point. So these locations just southeast of Fayetteville and Goldsboro probably are the greatest risk. Again, tropical cyclone tornadoes tend to be very short-lived, localized, but they can be destructive. So something to be concerned about, but they tend to be a little bit more limited in area impacted as well. Here's a larger view of the severe weather outlook for Friday. Again, similar message here near and east of Interstate 95. Could be some thunderstorms, of course, elsewhere, but most of those will not likely be severe, and they'll be elevated in nature, meaning they aren't likely to have structure that would support widespread kind of severe weather. So just hitting some takeaway slides, some takeaways from the briefing here, and highlighting that here, and then I can go to some questions which I see are coming in. Again, we're very confident this event will occur. Confidence is moderate, I guess, regarding exact impacts. That has increased a great deal this morning, thus the update to the forecast and the issuance of the tropical storm warning and also the flood watch. We do expect 2 to 6 inches of rain across the area, on average probably closer to 4 to 6 inches in that region from the coastal plain near the coastal plain into the southern Piedmont and Yadkin Valley area. That will likely result in some localized flash flooding. Wind gusts of 40 to 50 miles per hour could result in some scattered to perhaps numerous power outages and some localized wind damage, mainly across, or especially across the Sandhills and southern Piedmont. Everyone should get at least wind gusts over 35 miles per hour. That includes places up near Virginia border. We do think that some weak trees could come down, some branches and things like that. But hopefully, given the gusts may be peaking out around 50 miles per hour, that should keep us from widespread kind of concerns in terms of power outages. Again, a small risk for an isolated tornado, mainly near and east of Interstate 95. And there's also a risk of some minor river flooding. This highlights Sunday, I guess, would be the larger stem rivers, but some smaller rivers, or the flashier ones like the Hall River, and also the Rocky River, those may begin to launch up as early as Saturday. So again, that will depend on the focus of the heaviest rain and the character of the river. So that is the last slide here. We'll have another update with slides and timing by 6 o'clock today. We'll have some updated information, I hope, before that, and we'll share that on social media, including some timeline graphics and some other visualizations I think that will help. Given the fast evolving nature of things this morning, we wanted to at least make sure we had all of our topics covered here for you. I'm going to put on the current radar loop and pause the recording, and then we will work through some discussions. So thanks for joining us. Stand by for just a moment.